is this space which Ruchi founded about 3 years ago.
Our fearless leader, just a member, just a fearless leader. So this space was originally designed for the exact topic we're going to talk about tonight. So this space is all about helping people make a career transition and take the time to be really deliberate about their next venture. And so Ruchi started this space with a vision for bringing together the smartest people in the world, really, was her vision, and having them explore and learn about new fields together. And what's the result of her vision is we now have over 150 members and alumni, half of which are technologists and experts in a specific field, and half of which are entrepreneurs starting new companies. One of our members was a panelist, or one of our members is the moderator for the panel tonight, Ashton, was a member here for a year when he retired from sport and took the time to explore his next career move. And this panel started organically from conversations that I had in the past with many of the panelists here tonight. I previously was the director of Olympic and Paralympic partnerships at Visa. And after sponsoring over 100 athletes in Rio for the last Summer Olympic Games, realized there was this kind of gap from the sponsorship side and kind of the Olympic community in having a conversation about what comes next. And so I have been very fortunate to connect with people like Julia, who runs the Bay Area Olympian and Paralympian Network, and folks like Lisa, who is the USOC head of development here in the Bay Area. And in partnership with each of them have pulled together this event and hopefully many more to come. Our goal is to do this on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our moderator, who will introduce the panel and the panelists.
Thank you very much, Kara, and thank you guys for joining us. Brief kind of introduction. SPC, I think, started out of dinner conversation, as Kara said, around Ruchi's dinner table. And when thinking about this specific topic of transitioning, I was kind of thinking like, you're like crossing a bridge into two different types of things. Then I thought, that's really you're leaving kind of something behind. And I think this is more about changing states. So you're still the same person, and you're taking your past kind of like with you. It's more like a changing state than changing the whole direction. And I think me being able to come to SBC really helped me do that. And we're going to dive in to how that happened for all these folks. And hopefully the SBC members, since you're in that right now, you can kind of glean some insight. I also don't want this to be like we talk and then you guys ask questions, because I know that at the end of stuff, maybe you have questions throughout, you maybe forget by the end. So please just jump in. I think these are always better when they're more conversational. So if you can like agree to do that with me, that'd be very cool. Awesome. So the panelists tonight are some folks that I really admire. And I'm gonna have you introduce yourselves, but we have Erin, Brianne, Emily, and Margie up here. And I think this is more for the video, the mic. I'm gonna just pass this over to you. And please we're gonna try to keep it simple at first. Name, where you're from, and the sport you did professionally.
My name is Erin Cafaro McKenzie. I grew up in Modesto, California, good old Central Valley, and I rode in 2008 and 2012 Olympics.
I am Brianne Theisen-Eaton. I am married to Ashton. I grew up in a small town of 5,000 people in Saskatchewan, Canada, which is above Montana, North Dakota, if nobody knows. I ran track and field in the 2012 and 2016 Olympics. And I did the Heptathlon, which is, I always tell people, the women's version of what Bruce Jenner did.
I'm Emily Hughes. I'm a figure skater, and I competed in the 2006 Olympics. I'm from New York, but I live in San Francisco now.
I'm Margie Padder. I swam in the Sydney Olympics. That's now 19 years ago, which is scary to think about. And I live in the Bay Area, and originally from the UK, half an hour south of London.
Now I want to kind of...
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, my name's Ashton. Sure. My name's Ashton. I grew up in Bend, Oregon, and I did track and fields in the 2012 and 2016 Olympic Games. And kind of along that line, I wanted to give some context to folks around maybe the timeline of things and ask, when was it that sport was something that you couldn't do without? And so the idea here is, like, for example, I remember I was 5 years old and I was on my first baseball team. And that was the point from then on out that sport was like my thing. I couldn't do without it. I was always thinking about it. And so that's, 25, 26 years of it being a prime sort of thing in my life. And I want everybody to know kind of that length for you.
I guess I wasn't the kid who grew up thinking I would be an Olympian or wanted to be an Olympian. I actually danced for the first 12 years of my life. And so I guess sport, I always had an extracurricular, but I didn't really think it became a mainstay or in my life until I went to college. So I started rowing in college, and it just got progressively more addictive.
I am exactly the same as Erin. Always played sports growing up, and in high school doing track and field, it was more a means to get a scholarship, so I didn't have to pay for school, but it wasn't something that I was like, I want to go to the Olympics. I actually used to tell people that I didn't want to go to the Olympics because it was going to be too much work. So it was more just like, let's get a scholarship. But once I got to Oregon, it became like this. I don't know if it's because I got around like-minded people who were also obsessed with it, but, and then I saw my first Olympic trials in Eugene and just hooked me.
So I'm one of 6, and all of my siblings either figure skated or played hockey. And I'm the 5th, and so my mom would take my sister to the rink, and she said that I ran around and got really dirty, and she just put me on the ice, so she didn't have to watch me. And that was when I was 3. And so from then on, I loved the sport, but I think, and spent a lot of time on the ice, but I think my turning point was when I was 12 or 13, my sister won the Olympics. And I think watching her, all the work and all the hard work she put into it, and then seeing her win, that was for me, I was like, I want to do that. And I think for me, that was it. And then I kind of focused on skating quite a bit and, kind of balanced that with school. But skating was part of my life from when I was 3 to still kind of a part of my life, but in a different way.
I knew there was a reason we were going to be friends. So I'm also a 5th child, although I did have a sibling that was an Olympian. My mum was the same. So I was the 5th child. She had no time to look after me. She's like, you need to learn to swim straight away. So she threw me into a pool. I could swim when I was 2.5. And I was also, swimming is one of those sports where you kind of start when you were young. So I was kind of thrown in from 2.5. And by the time I got to 6, 7, 8, you realize that you can do something and you keep on doing it. And by the time I got to 10, I was completely hooked. And I could do a lot of sports, but swimming was always my focus. So I was probably around 10 when I was like, this is what I want to do and this is what I'm going to do. So.
And how long has it been since everybody's been retired from professional sport?
15 years.
9.
2.
7.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's also 2 for me. And so now we kind of have context on like the timeline of how long sport was important, and then how long it's been since you stopped doing that. And I guess the follow-up question would be, when you became a professional athlete, or when sports maybe became kind of like a professional pursuit, so this could totally start in college, did you have a plan? And if so, or if not, why? And what was it? So for example, I started college as I got a scholarship to go there for athletics, and my plan was really just to graduate. And then after that 4 years, my plan was to go to the Olympics, which was 4 years later. So I only really had a plan every 4 years, and there's like nothing after that.
My plan, let's see, going in, just walking onto a team, I literally had to look up at everybody. I was, anywhere from like 2 to a whole 12 inches shorter. Well, not 12, that's a little over exaggeration, 6 inches shorter than all my teammates. And I did not think I would do well, but I really loved the team environment. And so I was in it. And remind me of where we're going with this.
Well, it was more like, kind of setting up, because sometimes with this transition, maybe you had a plan or maybe you didn't.
Oh,
which can
yeah.
make the transition hard or easy.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to see if people had plans.
Career
Yeah.
plan, right?
Yeah.
Career plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Or if you didn't, it's cool. Like my story is I didn't. It was like, oh, I'm just going to graduate because that's what you do. And after
Yeah,
that, maybe you
yeah.
tried to avoid
Just like I
it.
didn't have a plan for that answer. Yeah, so
Probably bad question.
yeah, no, it's all good. So I did not have, I had a plan to go to law school. My parents told me I was good at arguing. And so that was my plan. I would have a political science major, and then, yeah, that was it.
I did not have a plan. In college, it's just NCAAs 1 year after another. And then, like Ashton said, once you graduate and you're a professional athlete, it went in 4-year cycles for me. So once one Olympics was done, it was like the next 4 years. And I honestly couldn't even see my life past that 4 years. And I didn't really even care what happened after those 4 years. And I didn't feel like I had time to even think or put the energy into what was going to happen after those 4 years, because I was just so focused on what I was doing. So it was just kind of unknown. And as Ashton and I put it, I never put any eggs in any other basket. They were like all going into the performance basket, and that was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think as an athlete, I think we all kind of have visions of what we want to do, where we want to go, and we kind of know what that takes. And for me, had that with sport and knew I wanted to go to college, and after that, wanted to explore, but didn't really have a post-college plan as I kind of transitioned from skating to college and after.
I think it's really hard to have a plan, right? Like, you're so focused on your sport and you can't think past it. I think it was a little bit different that I did Olympics and then I went to college afterwards. So college became my plan. Maybe I didn't know what I was doing after college, but I knew I had to go to college to have a plan. And then, full transparency, my plan changed like 300 times, and maybe it will continue to change. But long story short, no, I didn't have a plan. Okay. Still working on the plan.
Yeah, and I mean, I think part of this question is kind of setting up, I mean, the transition that we're here to talk about, I think would be easy if we did have a plan, right? There would be no like such transition. It would just kind of be like we're going from A to B because we know what we're doing. And so I think just kind of setting that up and understanding where you guys were at that point mentally was something that I kind of wanted to get some insight on. And the follow-up question to that would be, as you were going through your career and you were kind of, maybe you didn't have these plans, but you were just doing the next thing, which was the next event or the next year or the next games you're focusing on, were there any key kind of events within that had an impact on your career that made you either have to transition earlier or your career was done before you kind of set out for it to be? Or that maybe extended it, like you had some success and you were like, oh, I'm going to keep doing this longer, since we kind of didn't really have a plan. Does that make sense?
So my first Olympics in 2008, I was kind of a wild card. I was one of the last ones to make the boat. And so I didn't know what I knew I wanted to come back. Basically, I was like, oh, I'm just scratching the surface. And so when I went back in 2012, I started doing strength and conditioning outside of what the regular training plan was. And so I knew that's what I wanted to share and give back to the sport, was that it's not just this tall girl sport. You don't have to be born into this sport. You can actually grow into it as well and build your capacity. So that was I think the point in 2012. I mean, I love a good challenge. And so 2008 was great. I was like right on the edge, almost didn't make it. 2012, I was a mainstay in the boat, and I was looking for my next challenge at the end of 2012. So I think that was when I kind of knew it was time to transition out, and that I wanted to, do that next step.
I definitely had a moment that I think solidified my decision in the long term, but at the time I didn't realize it. But when Ashton and I would train during the year, we would train for 9 months and then we would take 3 months off every year. Most people would always be like, wow, that's a long time to be doing nothing. But we would be so burnt out by the end. And I think more than physically, it was like mentally, like every decision we'd make every day was like, is this going to help us reach our goals? So at the end of every season, I always felt a little bit burnt out. And then at the end of every event I did, heptathletes and decathletes have to run a distance event, which is like the worst thing you could possibly make us do because we're sprinters and jumpers. And so having to run like a half mile or a mile is like, I mean, you're just wondering how you're going to get through it. And every time at the start line, I'd be telling myself, I need to quit. I need to retire. I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't do this to myself. It was just so stressful. And then I would finish every one of those events and be like, that was the most amazing thing. And you do like a victory lap around this like 80,000 person stadium. And it was just like the coolest. But in Rio, I finished and I literally thought to myself, I can't do this anymore. Like, it was just this feeling of like, I'm done, I'm exhausted. And at first I thought it was just like, oh, this is like a typical year. This is like usually how I feel at the end of the season. 3 months will go by and I'll be ready to start again. And I just wasn't.
I think for me, figure skating is, the Olympics is the big marquee event of figure skating, and there are a lot of events in between every year. But I qualified for the '06 Games and competed, which was an amazing experience, and really wanted to make that 2010 Games. And kind of between that 4 years, a lot happens. I graduated high school, started college, had some injuries, and so the year of the 2010 Games, I decided that was going to be it. I was going to put everything on the table. That season, whatever happened was going to be my last. So I took some time off of college and focused on skating. Ended up not making the team, which I think for me was a learning experience of being able to get back into that level of competing at nationals, even though I didn't make the team. But what was crazy was I think that was a Saturday and school semester started Monday and I went back to school. And so my transition was just, a few days I was focused on, let me train to become an Olympian. And then I was right back on campus, going back to school, which was a bit of a very big shift. But I knew that year was going to be the end. I just didn't know, would I make the team or not.
Great question. You made me really think about pivotal moments. I think I always knew that I would retire as soon as I finished college. So college was kind of the end goal for me. I kind of finished international swimming. I actually found my love of swimming again just because I transitioned to just college, and that takes the pressure off international a little bit. I think where my pivotal moment on deciding career-wise was later on, because I spent 3 years, I moved to New York, tried a event planning job, tried a not-profit job, and just tried lots of different things. And I actually decided to avoid sport initially because I felt like I had a label on my head that said swimmer, and that's the only thing that people would associate me with. So I was like, I'm going to do anything but sport. And then, of course, after 3 years, what you know and love comes back to you, and you're like, okay, how do I get back to sport? And I actually ended up going to a sports business program with NYU. And getting an internship, which helped me get my foot in the door. But I think that was my pivotal moment, was to be okay with, swimming's always going to be a part of my life, and I learned to embrace it again versus trying to transition away from it. And then I'm now still in the sports industry 10 years later and love it. So it took me a while. It took me like 3 or 4 years to figure out where I wanted to be and where I wanted to be comfortable. So.
Well, I think we should kind of talk about that next, but I appreciate you guys sharing that. So we kind of have like context on how long you were in this thing, the kind of plans you had laid out, but then why it was maybe terminated, or some of those key moments that led to the end coming. And now let us know basically when you made that decision to retire, what happened, what did it feel like, what did you have support, did you not? And maybe that's enough for now, but like retroactively, what were some like the mistakes that you thought you made, or some things that you could do better in order to make that more smooth?
I think I kind of made the decision to retire as I crossed the line in 2012. I feed off of challenge, and I realized, like, we won again, which is, not boring at all. It's great, as you well know, to, achieve your goal. But I also realized that, being in an Olympic sport, it's, at least for rowers, it's like a true amateur sport, and you're doing it for the love of it. And there's so many other athletes that are in waiting to have that spot and that opportunity to compete at the games. And I wanted to kind of I realized that, like, as much fun as it was, like, I should move on to the next challenge and let the next generation have their chance. And yeah, I think that was hard. I also, it's always fun to do something you're competent in, right? And it, like, makes you feel good when you're good at something. But for me, that I like need something to, it's hard to make me feel alive. And that's kind of where I'm at right now still.
So when you say talk about that next challenge,
yeah,
you just didn't know what that was.
I didn't know what it was. And that I was, and I was okay. I think, and I'm still okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess I still don't know what that next challenge is.
Did you have support in it? Like, who was there while you were making the decision?
My husband, who's in the back. All for it. And I think there was definitely two different types of supports. There was one that was like, hey, you should do it till your body tells you no and you can't do it anymore, or you get kicked off the team or whatever. And then the other one was like, I'm behind you, do it till you love it. And that's hard too, because you're like, yes, I should probably, represent my country as long as I can and do, this sport as long as I can. But on the other side of it is it serving you? Is this where you want to be? Yeah.
I guess the thing is, we don't know the answer to that question at the time.
No, you never know, but you kind of know. And I think it's a lot like Brianne said, like, you have to be so hungry, especially because there's not any, like, very little financial incentive. It's just this hunger. I guess that's all I can really explain it. And I see some nods from the crowd too. It's just this, like, insane hunger you have to be there on the line and show up every morning, even if your body's hurting, and, putting in all these hours. And I think that hunger I felt for the first time after I crossed the line, I was like, wow, it's kind of gone. So now it's my time to do something else.
Gotcha. And before we get to Bree, is this resonating with a lot of folks here? And what would be some, like, the key things that are resonating?
Well, actually, I want to see if I can take you guys, ask you some questions. Because I think that, it's a great honor to find in life that passion and purpose. And I think when we often grow up, and especially in our culture, as a North American culture, we're put on these two tracks often, academics and athletics. And if you're lucky and you pursue them to where we get to go, to the Olympics, you're really fortunate. The question I have is, what happens when those tracks end, and you go out and into life, and I think you mentioned this a little bit. How did you all find difficulty or challenges, psychologically or otherwise, sort of trying to match that level of passion and purpose that you had in your sport? How do you find that, in the rest of life? How do you settle for something that's not there when deep down inside we are all hungry to create and to live fully? So I don't know if there's a question there, but I'm trying to ask for that moment. How have you guys grappled with that, or have you grappled with it? How have you grappled with it? Where are you in the process, because it's ongoing? And how have you tried to find something that equals that passion and purpose that you were privileged to have in sport in the rest of your life?
So I was really fortunate to have a great sports psychologist that I worked with throughout a lot of my career. And she was a really big part of helping me through the transition. I mean, she was the first person I told that I was thinking of retiring. She walked me through all of these different things to think about, like before announcing it. And I like literally didn't announce it for 4 months, like just took 4 months to really think about it. And some of those questions she had for me were like, okay, next time you're sitting on an airplane and somebody asks, what do you do? Like, what are you gonna say? You know, and it was just like those really uncomfortable feelings of like, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I do, and like then that's when you'd like break down crying, you know, because you're just like, I don't have anything anymore, or I lost my community or whatever that was. But the one thing that I think she helped me realize, and I don't think this has to be how it is for every professional athlete that retires. I think some people will be really fortunate to find the passion in something else like they did in sport, although I think that's really, really hard. She explained to me sport gave you everything you needed in life. You had a community, you had friends, you had a goal, you had, you know, all of these things that like fulfilled everything you needed. She's like, when you go into the working world, your job is not going to do that. Like you have to, that's like what work-life balance is, which a lot of athletes don't have. You know, it's just like train, compete, and like you're totally fine with that. But she was like, working is like, you work, yes, but you need to have friends, and you need to go out, and you need to go on vacation, and you need to see your family, and you need to have like days off, and you need to have downtime. And I think I just like wasn't used to planning that. Mm-hmm. And so putting a priority on that has really helped, like going to Tahoe on weekends with friends and stuff. Like I didn't understand how important that was until I got a job and was just like a regular person. And so I think that has been like a big one for me in, I don't know the answer to like, how do you find the thing that you're as passionate about? I don't know if I ever will, because it's just, I mean, it was like such an amazing thing to have, you know, but.
I was gonna have a tangential answer, cool. But because I think I think you really highlighted like what sport gives you and how you can kind of take that to your next thing of like community and like how do you find that, and maybe it's not in sport, but maybe it's somewhere else. But I think related to the question you had asked earlier and what you said was, I think sport gives you so many, I hate to use the word, but transferable skills, where it's not just like, oh, hard work is important and it will get you your goal. You know, it's how do you communicate, like so many things that I think your original, like what you introduced, where we're not just going somewhere and leaving everything behind. It's kind of like we learned so many things, and you know, you learn how to lead a team, you learn how to, you know, set small goals to get somewhere, or how to navigate something, or you know, so many things that I'm not listing right now, but it's using those in a different way. And I think if I, you know, as I made that transition out of sport, I was starting to apply for internships, and they were like, oh, submit a resume. And I thought, well, I skated 20 years of my life. Yeah. And then, you know, realizing that there was so much more that I could put on there, and that now I use every day in work. Yeah, I think I went to I started talking to people. I talked to my parents, I talked to my friends, and I thought, I don't know what to put on here. And it was funny because, you know, my coach would say, oh, but you did this event, and you can put that there. And in my mind, you know, I think it was part of like a nonprofit, and in my mind, I was like, well, I did that because I really wanted to. I didn't think it made it on the resume, kind of thing. And there were just so many things like that you know, you could kind of add on there. But yeah, I think that you know, even every day, like we competed in front of thousands of people, and you know, that kind of transfers into, well, you know, can you make a presentation in front of, you know, a VP or in front of 10 people? And, you know, you learn those skills. Maybe it's just in sport, but that you can kind of shift to like another, you know, another aspect that I think I didn't really kind of internalize, and still internalizing it. But I think knowing that then, I think would have helped a lot.
100% agree. So I work for Visa, and it's kind of, I know there's a few of you in here, like it's kind of a joke within our group. There is so many athletes, and like, you know, athletes have 95%, if not more, of what employees are looking for: go-getter attitude and hard work ethic. Like, honestly, like, I've now had a career for 10, 15 years, and like every time I interview somebody or want to hire somebody, like, they're the traits you look for first. Like, you can learn stuff, you can, it's just having those like core attributes that you really have to hone in on, and they're like ingrained in all of us. So I think that the hard part is, and Caitlin, I've had this conversation with you, it's like, when you're an athlete, you have a very specific goal, and there's very specific steps in the ladder that you can take. When you enter the workplace, and this is what I struggle with the most, is it's not necessarily what you put in is what you get out. It's a little grayer than that, and there's other people that influence it. So you, like, for me, the biggest psychological shift was, how do I still have a goal? What are the steps of the ladder to get there? Who do I need to help me get there? Like, that's the biggest transition, because when you're an athlete, it's very clear how you get there and who's going to help you get there. So for me, that was like one of the hardest things, and still have to work on, like, what's my goal and how do I get there? So.
What do you think helped you in your process of like finding yourself again after you've kind of lost that? Not like, I mean, you'll always be an Olympian, but you're not, like someone said, you know, when you introduce yourself, you're not like, oh yeah, I'm a swimmer or I'm a figure skater, because you're not anymore. You're retired. So like, how do you find who are you now that you're not an athlete? Again, you'll always be an Olympian, but you're not, like, that's not your life anymore. So what do you guys feel like helped you in that process? And like, after all these years, do you feel like you have found that identity, or are you still like having a hard time with that? Because I've been out for 2 years and I still am like, I don't know how to introduce myself to someone like sitting on a plane, other than like, well, I went to the Olympics, but you're not going to say that to someone. So that's my question.
I think for me, I think it's something where sport, I think at some point defined me, and now it's just part of who I am. So I am a figure skater, but I'm so much more. And I think when I left skating, it was, I'm a figure skater, period. And now it's a comma. And I think kind of coming to that, you know, mindset, I think really just made that shift. I don't know if anyone else felt similarly.
Well, I liked your analogy when we had the conversation last time. I think about walking down the mountain.
Oh yeah, that was a great analogy.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated by this space in between, if you will, goals. And I think, you know, there is this big push to find your next goal, you know, and not float around. You should be swimming towards your goal. And so there's a friend of mine who, he had a buddy who was he's a free skier. So basically that means they helicopter up to the mountain and then just like free ski all the way down. Well, actually, no, sorry. On this one, he actually hiked up this peak called Mount Mansalu, who's like, I think it's like the 16th highest peak in Nepal. Yeah, so they're hiking up and they're like at this maybe third base camp, and huge avalanche came down and wiped out everybody in his camp. Somehow he made it. They all tumbled down. He landed on top, you know, had a couple broken bones, but pretty much fine. And so airlift, everybody came in, and they were, you know, basically like, you need to get in, we need to check you out. Let's take you to the hospital. And there was a local there, is a, you know, Sherpa who basically was trying to find all the dead bodies, but he came up to this guy and was like, I highly recommend you walk down the mountain. And so he was like, well, this guy must know what he's talking about. He's been on this mountain for a while. So he went and walked down the mountain instead of getting in the helicopter and being airlifted out. And he basically said he was so much better for it because he went through all the rainbows of emotions walking down this mountain, and it actually gave him the time to process what had just happened versus just moving on to the next mountain, if you will, and goal. And so, I think that's, I can't do better justice to this analogy than that, is just like allowing yourself the time to process what just happened instead of just trying to jump to your next goal or your next mountain.
Which I think says a lot about the space here at SPC, because maybe some of you are like coming right out of school, coming from a company, maybe it was yours and you sold it or something like that, but like giving yourself time and having this kind of area to do that with other folks, because what we're kind of saying here is we didn't necessarily all have other folks to do that with. So I think it's a really great spot for those of you that are here. Sure. Oh, yes.
My question is, do any of you guys still participate in any of the sports that you were competing in the Olympics, whether it's swimming or figure skating or just for fun? And is that frustrating because you're not at the level when you are like high performing? And how do you handle that? Or do you just try to pick up a new activity?
Sure. So I have 2 kids and 2 on the way actually, but before that happened, I would keep fit and would swim and did some master swimming, and actually that was really good psychologically. I'm okay with never being as fast as I was while I was competing, but you're still in a community of people that love swimming, love keeping fit, and you automatically have a bond with them. So some of my lifelong friends are now some of the people I did master swimming with. I also went into swim coaching, which was another really good outlet to like stay within the swimming community and feel connected to it, and kind of I get a buzz out of like helping people swim faster, so I still feel connected to the swimming world. You kind of have to let go, never swimming as fast, but I'm okay with that.
For me, I'm still involved with skating. My nieces skate, so I try and get on the ice with them sometimes. I still do a show here or there, but now it's more hosting instead of actually skating, which was a slow transition. And still involved with like US figure skating and stuff like that. So I think for me, I think skating was such a big part of my life, and now it's kind of a part of my life, but in a much different way. And I try to get on the ice once a month, but sometimes it's every other month.
I can safely say I do not do any more track workouts. Well, I mean, I that's true. I have not stepped foot on a track since Rio, I'm pretty sure. I do workouts, track-like workouts, but I don't time them because it's really depressing. And I now kind of transitioned more like, 5 months, 6 months after Rio, I was in a vulnerable place and someone convinced me to do a marathon. So I like switched to doing different type track stuff, I guess.
Did you already do the marathon?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was not fun.
Well, you do another one.
So yeah, I don't, I mean, I think like some of these other sports, it's like more something you would do recreationally, but yeah, I'm not into racing.
A full day of throwing events together.
No.
I'll have Ruchi know that the first track I stepped on after Rio was Kezar Stadium. Yes.
So when I was thinking about this question, I started off by, how do you feel about not being the best at what you do next? And then as I was thinking about that question, I realized that you actually get really comfortable about not being as good as you used to be. So now I actually have a different question, which is, how do you continue to be ambitious at what you're doing next, to be the best at it?
I think in order to get to the level that I had gotten to, you always kind of start from zero, so to speak. And so when I was young, I was never the best, but I just tried to improve as fast as I could. And it was really asking the question, what am I capable of? And trying to find the answer. It's like probably the best way I can describe it. And the way to find the answer is to, try your best. And so a lot of facets to that, but it was like a lot of listening to coaches, experimenting, watching other athletes, things like that. Then I guess once I decided to retire, I was very familiar with that state of the beginning, if you will. And what comes with that, I guess it's like a feeling or a mindset or some kind of like mentality of, all right, here we go sucking again, and like trying to get good at something. And so, I think people maybe look at Olympians and see like the stuff they accomplished, but I can't speak for everybody, but we weren't the best when we started in general.
I think you can speak for everyone.
Okay. Good, okay. And so it was just like, you have all of those learnings of what it took to get there. And I think you just kind of apply it to the next thing. And the ambition, honestly, maybe there's a couple things I can touch on. One is, I think, intrinsic. You just, your success is a byproduct of having that already. And then I think also, because you've gone through it, you understand that the journey is really the best part. And so it's very exciting. And excitement can also feel like fear. Those two are like very, two sides of the same coin.
I think I'm going to merge these two questions together because I took a hiatus from fitnessing or rowing, if you will, like Maggie did for a while. I was like, I don't want to be defined by this. But then recently I started getting back into it, and it has actually helped me remember how to talk to myself nicely, if you will. I think it's really hard to do well when you're beating yourself up all the time. Like when I get on the erg, which is this, if you haven't, it's the rowing machine. It's this awful machine that just stays in one place, and there's a number that tells you for better or for worse if you're going faster or slower every single time. But it's super defeating for some people, but for me, I really enjoyed it because it would give me instant feedback, and I'd be like, yes, that was a good stroke. No, okay, let me change something. Yes, good. And I developed a really good self-talk. I don't know, I was just like I was nice to myself on the rowing machine. And then when I, as a novice at something else, in business or research that I went into, I was really mean to myself. I was like, what, you're sucking at this, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough. And so I recently would actually go back onto the erg and be like, all right, let's relearn how to say something nice to yourself again. So that I liked kind of going back to my sport. And yeah, there's, you still have that like ingrained movement pattern. So it makes you feel good. The numbers are not the same. We'll put that out there. But it's still like, I don't know, I'm not judging myself by it. I'm not judging myself by every stroke. And that reminds me in the other context to not judge myself by every day or, every failing. That, it's just about taking another stroke and trying to do a little bit better the next time.
I also think, Richie, that it's the process of creation. Whether you're like creating a company or kind of like creating a painting, you're creating performances. And it is an incredible feeling when you do kind of create that thing. And I guess more to kind of what I was saying before, just that process, which it very much is, of the blank canvas, if you will, and then getting that thing painted. It's just it's like part of human nature. It's like super exciting. And so whether you're doing a sport again or like trying to go for a goal again, whether you're doing a startup again, like whatever your goal is, whether you're trying to be like the best, venture in the valley, it's like you're trying to create something that hasn't existed either for you or for like, the world. And so
I think the reality might be that I just lack the same level of competitive spirit that you guys do. Because honestly, like the thought of being ambitious again tires me. Like I don't want to be ambitious again. Like I'm exhausted just thinking about it. So maybe at some fundamental level, I lack the innate competitive spirit to the extent that you guys do, which is kind of sad in some sense. But I mean, I can't even bring myself to feel ambitious.
Right. Yeah. Do you get excited when you see other people that are ambitious? I mean, it's kind of like SBC, right?
I definitely get excited when other people are ambitious. I think that, like, I always go into myself every couple of months and I'm just like, I'm just not as ambitious as I was when I was like 23, 25, 26, 28. Maybe I just have different goals in life, or maybe life just happened to me and I became too old. But just like the concept of trying to get ambitious is one thing that I visit over and over again, and I fundamentally question whether I'm lazy or I lack the motivation or I don't have the right motivation to reach the same level of ambition or feel excited about being that ambitious. So I think
I'm maybe a little bit further on in my career, so I definitely hear what you're saying. My ambition that I had with my swimming career has never been replicated. But it's replicated in small ways where like swimming was a macro goal and all the energy went to that. Like what I feel like I end up doing is there's like micro goals and you end up putting your effort in those spaces, and I'm still self-critical that I can't do everything, right? When it was just swimming, it was very easy. Now I'm a mom, I have a job, you have conflicting things, but I think most athletes still, we don't do things by halves, and I still take that into my everyday job and life where if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it properly and I want to do it as well as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. So I don't ever aspire to be the best at anything that I do anymore, but I want to be the best that I can be, and I feel like that's what stayed with me, and it's now micro goals versus a macro goal.
Sometimes I feel like my ambition is gone if I'm not interested, if I'm not super passionate about something. So sometimes Ashton will be like, we should start this, and I'll be like, I'm just not interested in it. I could tell I wouldn't give very much effort, but I have trouble believing that if you've with South Park, for example, I don't know how many years ago exactly it started, but it started around the dinner table and then all of a sudden it was a thing. So there was ambition around that. And so I feel like for me, it's not the same level as what sport is, but when I find something that I'm interested in and someone says, oh, this is going to be really hard, I don't know if it can be done, then that's where the ambition kicks in, because I'm like, no, it can be done. I don't know. That's how I feel about it.
I think this parlays into your question about finding that passion and how do you do it, and the ambition and passion I think are very much connected. And I do think that and you had said, I don't know when you find something that's I'm passionate about, as passionate about a sport. My opinion is that you have found the thing that you're passionate about and love when you do not mind going through the worst it can give you in order to accomplish the goal. I think that's kind of a good formula for saying, I think I found the thing that I really like and that passion, because that's how I felt as sport. I was like, cool, that workout will make me throw up, let's do it. If it's gonna get me to the whatever. And so finding that same level, that's when work and play kind of come together.
I also think it's kind of important to listen to that lack of ambition too. That might be a sign that you need to rejuvenate and maybe even allow yourself some space or nature to get creative again, right? So if you're constantly pushing yourself and trying to find your next thing and do your next goal and be the next person you want to be or create something else, something great, that's you might be spinning your wheels. It might be time to step back. And I think that's sometimes what, I miss about having planned recovery and to training. There's no planned recovery in life, right? So I think it's important to listen to yourself and also respect those signals that hey, I'm not feeling super energized right now. Maybe it's just time to maintain, or hey, this is a good signal for me to step back. I need to recharge my batteries.
Is there anybody working on anything now where they're kind of in a state that some of these folks were in or are in SPC? It's cool if you guys, I was just curious.
They've all got it figured out. They know what they're doing.
Yep, everybody's got it figured out. It's good.
I'm kind of in that state because my company is moving and I have this long runway, because I'm not, and I have this long runway to figure out what I want to do. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure it out. So I'm reevaluating, like, going through exercises. What's my passion? What do I really want out of my job? And just like reevaluating everything.
The other thing I'd say to that real quickly is I've made some not so great decisions in my career, but I wouldn't have got to where I am right now without those bad decisions. Like, sometimes you want stepping stones to the place you want to end up, but making a wrong decision helps you get to the right decision. So that's like what I've learned the most, is like, don't second guess your decisions, just make a decision, and it's going to lead you to another decision somewhere else along the way, and that's the way your life goes. So I just feel like there's never a bad decision, it just leads you to something else.
Yeah, and it's all learning. You learn that maybe that wasn't the right decision, and you can make an even better one next time.
Yeah. Yep.
I do want to ask you all a question about your relationship to the Olympics. Not the performing anymore, but just to the broader movement. But before I do that, I want to say to Maria that I'm 40 years out of my Olympic experience, and I'm still wondering what I'm doing. So it's a lifelong, it's not gonna, but it's a process. I want to put in a little plug. About a year ago, I put out a viral survey among global Olympians and Paralympians, and some folks here participated in that. And it was that question about what's their engagement with the Olympic movement. It's called the International Olympic Movement, and movement usually has ideas and actions associated. So my question was trying to figure out how involved how much do Olympic athletes identify it when they get out further away from their competitive days? And that's the question I do want to ask of you. And in terms of myself, you're asking if anybody's involved. I'm 40 years out, but actually I've been working on a project with some of the folks here from the Northern California Olympians to try to figure out actually how to get us back into the movement, not to get more accolades and not to revisit the glory days, but to transfer some of the beauty and power that we experience in Olympics, that stuff that gave us the power to excel and rise above ourselves. The power of the Olympics is transcendental possibilities, and that's what each of us in life is searching for. And I think as we as Olympians and Paralympians have this incredible ability to give that to people. Just go to a school and say you're an Olympian and watch the kids. It's not about you, it's about what you give to them. And so I'm desperately trying to figure out how to create a movement, a nonprofit that will fit in the Olympic movement to tap into that power, because I see it in Julie and I see it in Kelly and I see it in people in Northern California. How can we be involved and give some of that to make the world a better place? And I'd love to hear your guys, how you're processing that and what's your relationship and identity to the Olympics. And if anybody wants a copy of that survey, come up afterwards and give me your email and I'll send it out to you, because I did the findings.
I mean, for me, it was only, my last Olympics was only 2 years ago. And I think for a year and a half, for sure, I just totally stepped away from it because I felt like I needed just a break and to do something else, because I felt like it was just consumed me for so many years. But now, I think we could probably all relate to this, but like going to the Olympics and winning a medal, it was just like checking a box at the time. Like you didn't even really understand the magnitude of what you did. It was just like, okay, done, next, So now I think, like I've done this, Ashton, where I've like actually looked at my medal in the last 2 months and be like, I can't believe I have one of these. Like I didn't, like it hasn't really started to sink in until now. And understanding like the magnitude of what you've done. And so I think I'm just at that point right now. I like haven't even thought about what you're talking about.
I think maybe part of the reason we're here is because it's a very hard question to answer. How do you get involved? And I sometimes liken the Olympics to kind of the military, if you will. You're part of this thing. There's like a lot of plans for you, a lot of support. You always kind of have like a mission and objective. And then all of a sudden you're out of the military, and it's like this thing that's kind of separate, very inspirational, kind of, but just separate from what we'll label as everyday life. And how do you connect those two? Like, I'm not sure, I don't know how military folks really connect their past, if they want to their now. And I think the same question is very hard to answer for the Olympics, which is funny because I don't think it's like so far off as the military, but I don't know, if you're not an athlete pursuing that thing, you're kind of a spectator, and there's a gap. And so I kind of actually see the same thing with universities. University was incredibly life-changing for me, and then I left. And like, sure, you can say I'm an alumni, but what is the involvement that I could have now? And I actually don't really know what the impact would be. In fact, they just let us have our U of O email back. I went to University of Oregon. They just sent a message and they're like, hey, would you like your U of O email? It's like, I'm never gonna use that thing, but yes. Yeah. Because that is a tie now. Like, that is a tie that I can have. So trying to answer that question is good. I think nonprofits and things like this are good, and having people initiate them as well as good. So good on you for that. But you can get an Olympian email. Yeah. Olympian email also. So the email thing seems good.
I think it's a really good question. Like as you asked it, I would love to be more involved. I think my challenge is that I've moved 10,000 miles from home, so I have that piece of it. But I think it's similar to what you were saying, is like, how do you get involved? What does that look like? What are you trying to do? What's the message? And I also feel like, this is my party of one, but I'm not really into social media too much. So like, I know a lot of the Olympic groups are on social media, and I get, pinged on them, but it's like getting people in person is far more valuable, I personally think, but that's also a lot harder to do. So I totally get that too. And just thinking about what you said about finally realizing what you did. I was saying to you that I'm 20 years out almost, and like I watch the Olympics and I'm so in awe of like how far like the athletes have come, and then I have to be like, hit myself and be like, I actually did that one day, and I completely took it for granted. So it's like very odd. Yeah, it just becomes a very odd, and it'll continue to be odd to like be like, I actually did that, and it's further and further apart. So yeah,
I think that there's like this there are some, and I think it's the soundbite that we competed to represent our country or to create, and this human form, that basically push the boundaries of our human form, right? That's like the ideals of Olympism. It sounds like a dirty word. But it's like, it's the same in military, like everybody's, the soundbite is, you did it to serve your country. And in my candid conversations with, military members and also my teammates, it actually boils down like that. While that was part of it, I think a bigger piece of it was actually the community. I did it for the person sitting in front of me and behind me, not necessarily. And then the bonus was like, oh yeah, cool. I like represented the USA, and it inspired other people. But I think, that the community piece is really what kind of ties me to it.
Yeah. I was going to say community piece, because it's your community while you're competing, but then, we're part of the community together. And there's this community, which we kind of now have in Northern California, but also like, your sport and all that stuff. But I also, for me, I've had varying connections with the Olympics. I worked at the IOC for a year, and that was really interesting, of seeing the Olympics from a whole different perspective. Was able to experience the Olympics with working for a sponsor, and that was really interesting. Obviously being a fan, watching on TV or live and cheering everyone on is such a big part of it. And but I guess coming back to the center, I think it's the community.
And also to kind of piggyback on that, and I forget who asked, but one of the, or I don't even know if we've gone here yet, but one of the best pieces of advice that I've received for what to do next or what your next purpose should be, they said, forget about that. Find the community first that values you and that you feel like you belong. Doesn't matter if it's, aligns with your sense of purpose quite yet. But once you find a community that you feel comfortable in, then you can actually start to thrive. But until you do that, and if you're just constantly chasing your purpose or your passion, it's gonna be really hard.
I think that's a great way to go as far as the advice is concerned. So, Brianne? As far as like for the next step type of thing, and if you have any advice for somebody who's kind of like going through a transition or, onto something new after having done something already?
I don't know about going on to something new once you've tried something already, but I think this it sort of goes back to, I think you had brought it up, like, I think sitting like in that transition point when you're like, I don't know what I'm doing or who I am, I found it okay to just tell people, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like in this weird transition, and just like sitting in it for a while. And like I sat in it for like a year and a half almost, and like didn't do anything, just like, this is another thing my sports psychologist always used to say, but you have to like feel your feelings and like take them in and not just like try to push them down and like, I'm fine. You have to like accept them and take them in and know that you're going to feel that way, and then figure out what you want to do, but like not rush yourself through it. I thought that helped me a lot, but at the same time, when we're talking about community, like Ashton and I did it together, which, and I've told Kara this, like helped a lot to not feel like I was the only one having to go through it, because it's not easy. And then I think part of that is like finding a community and finding a place where you feel like you're supported and fit in that time. I don't know. That's just what I found helpful.
We're in a place that does that.
Yeah.
I think everybody here can kind of understand that.
It's kind of summing up a lot of the stuff we talked about of, be okay taking time, embracing ambiguity, which I think is a huge thing. I think knowing that you have a lot of skills that you can use in many different places, and knowing that, you did achieve something really high in one place, but you didn't do that overnight, and that took a lot of time, and being ready to kind of take that step of whether that's doing that again somewhere else or something totally different.
Tried a lot of different things.
Yeah,
I moved from California to New York because I went on interview. I graduated in LA, and I'd go on an interview that took me 5 hours to get there. And I'd arrive and I was like, I so don't want to do this at all. And like after doing that for 2 months, I remember calling my mom and she's like, where are you? I'm like, I'm on a plane, I'm moving to New York. She's like, you're doing what? So I just moved to New York and just tried to find a job. And I don't regret just trying a whole bunch of things before. Like it took me 3 or 4 years to figure out actually what I wanted to do. So the only thing I'd say is just keep trying things. If it doesn't work, you move on to the next thing. And yeah, you just meet a lot of people. It opens doors for you. That's what I ended up doing.
Piggybacking off of that too, I think for me, what helped so much, just any stage of transition, is talking to people and like reaching out to people. And most times, people will happily talk to you about what they do, their experience, or whatever you're trying to look for. And I think that really helped me, because as I was leaving sport, I thought, well, I don't know what this type of role at this type of company means. Do I even want to do business? Like, what does that mean?
What do you do for 8 hours a day? Like, I was like, it's so confused. What do people do?
And for me, reaching out to people and having lots of coffee chats really made a difference.
I will also add that I think a mentor or some sort of coach is probably wildly beneficial for everybody. And I think one of my first observations when I came to South Park Commons, really kind of fresh off retirement, about a year, I was like, geez, there are a lot of really talented people in here. Where's the coach or the coaches? And it was just kind of a thought that occurred to me. But after talking with some folks, it was like, what did a coach do for you as an athlete? And kind of explained it. And they're like, man, yeah, that would be really interesting to have. Somebody who's either done it before or can kind of, because what happens is if you're starting a company for the first time or kind of doing something for the first time, a person who's been through it or taken other people through it, they can see ahead. So you're going through all these novel things, like phase 1, phase 2. When you're done with phase 2, it's blank after that. You have no idea how to get to phase 3. That person does. They've like seen somebody go there, or they've been there themselves. And that's really, I think, the benefit of a mentor or coach is somebody who knows all the mistakes you're going to make, lets you kind of make them, and then teaches you the lesson about them. Because our coach for years would say stuff and just we would not get it, and we'd finally make the mistake and have it click 3 years later. I was like, right, I remember you saying that 2 years ago. And it's just that's when I was like, they can forecast, they can totally see. And I think actually, Ruchi or some of the other kind of like mentors and coaches around here, to be able to have the patience to tell somebody something, watch them make the mistake when you just told them not to make it, and kind of keep that lesson going is probably very hard to do. And so respect that for sure. Profession. Right, for sure. Maybe that's why there's not very many of them.
That's why we are coaches.
Exactly. People are, why didn't you coach? I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So anyway, I would say track one of those down.
I think in some sense you guys are too humble. If you just basically told people you are of Olympian grade quality and like are best at what you do, tens of thousands of doors will open up for you. Like people will make the time, the room, take the time to I remember when Ashton talked to me, I was like, we're not a match for you. We're like super intellectually oriented. We talk about these deep tech subjects. You would probably be better off going somewhere else. And it was like really fascinating. Like he didn't once mention like who he was or what he did or what he was interested in or like, any of those different kinds of things. And I came back here and I was like, so I met this guy and he was like a really interesting introduction from Cara, but I don't think he's a good fit for our community. And everyone just like pounced on me and they were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, that was my take. And then I had to go back to him and apologize for being so presumptuous. And then invite him back to join the community because I got yelled at. And it was just like, it's honestly like, I think you need to like lean on what you have achieved to date to open up doors in the future, which I think you guys are really bad at doing.
Yeah. But Ruchi, part of it is like what we're just saying, like we don't think what we did was that amazing. Because like we're in this community of people who do that all the time, So when you get into the real world, you're like, I did that.
Just like you make the analogy with the army, I would go out of my way to help someone who served in the army.
I see what you're saying.
Do you, I don't think you understand how much people value that. No,
It is also an interesting, I don't want to be like, hi, I'm Emily, I'm an Olympian. That's, well, that's not me. Like, I need to be true to myself, too. But I do think you're right. It's like I was saying before, you learn so much about being an Olympian. Like I think it naturally kind of comes into conversation around when you're talking about yourself and not your identity, but like so many of the things you did is tied to that. But it is a good point that you didn't have it on your resume.
Yeah. Me? No, I didn't. I didn't have a resume.
But I see what you're saying because there's a gap in our life if we don't say that. And then everybody's thinking, what have you been doing?
It's not even that. I think you underestimate the power of what you have achieved to unlock opportunities for the future. And you're doing yourself a disservice. You can take 5 years to get to that point, but you're doing yourself a disservice.
She's good. I think she's completely right.
Yeah. No, I think you are right, and I think this is part of like. Hopefully what this movement is about too is helping athletes be okay with saying it and then also helping corporate and communities understand the need and the value of athletes. But I can also say that I have shamelessly put 2-time Olympic gold medalist on my resume.
It's not shameless. That's not shameless.
Yeah. But it has gotten me, it hasn't really gotten me, it's a soft skill, if you will, or it's at least the places I've applied. And I have applied to a lot of places and not been looked at because I do not have the hard skills they're looking for. So I think that's kind of, and it, you know, and it's just, I couldn't agree more. I think that if I could get in front of them and have a conversation, it would be different. But I do think that there still is a hard skill gap. Like they're gonna, and this is the similar thing to the struggle with military and military transition. Like, how do we talk about, you know, what, you know, hard work? Like, what does that mean? How does that going to apply to somebody who's, you know, wants to be a tech product manager? If somebody's already been a tech product manager, the company's probably going to want that person who already has that experience, right? So anyhow.
I am saying that there is a way to leverage the fact that you do have Olympic gold medals. And again, like if I got a resume that said 2 Olympic gold medals and I've built a couple of companies in my past, I wouldn't know what to think about it. But if I had an introduction saying, the way like people pounced at me when I walked back here and I said no to Ashton, and my husband was like, do you realize like he's probably been the best athlete in like your living history in the last 8 years? And someone else is like, do you realize what it takes to be on top of your game? And it would be really interesting to interact with a person like that. And all of a sudden it became a network of people wanting to both interact with him, but also like wanting to include him in their world and also make the right set of introductions. So again, if I got the resume, which is what I did get from Ashton, my immediate answer to that is like, yeah, I don't think we're a fit, or there are no synergies there. So it really is, it does boil down to a couple of things. You guys should create a community amongst yourself. The more experienced people within the community should lead the way there, and then open up introductions into the rest of the world. That's the way the world works.
I do think that your point, like, it is that, like, you know, on paper, I think we all, you know, what it means to be Olympian is so much more than what you see on TV. And I think that's where you're seeing like what Ashton is probably bringing to South Park Commons, and like what you would definitely bring if you had like that interview. And it's that gap, like exactly what you were saying of how do you quantify what that means? And it's hard to do that on paper.
Yeah.
I think the great thing is all of this is actually talking about why I think the transition is difficult. For one, the culture of sport, depending on the sport, I suppose, is one of actually more humble. And from being around this community in Silicon Valley for a while, it's actually quite different. You put your previous successes like on your pitch deck. And they're like, oh yeah, we know that like thing that happened or the company that you were part of. That's really cool. We're now interested to talk more. And so there was a little bit more initiative or kind of like pulling things forward with your past and being proud of it. But everybody else, like I think everybody understands that's how things are done in this kind of space. Whereas everybody understands in sports, like that jerk who's talking about his like stuff or her stuff is one of those like, I don't know, asshole athletes or something.
Yeah, you never point to the grandstands. You don't do the Babe Ruth.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. So getting over that and understanding how the world works, to your point, Ruchi, is actually part of the transition and something that I've realized now, which is good.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm sure we can all agree that it's been really awesome hearing all of your different perspectives. I'm just curious from your experiences, where did you draw your confidence from as an athlete? And then when you transitioned out of the athletic world, did you have difficulties drawing confidence again? And, you know, whether it was drawing from your training, all those hours that you were putting in, and then in the professional world, it's kind of hard to equate that. And did you have any difficulties finding your confidence going in a professional setting?
I mean, confidence is a progression. That, yeah, I think, like we all said, we all kind of sucked at our sports when we first started, or at least we're not the best. And so, yeah, no, I don't think I think it was a built confidence towards the end, and through repetition, you get confidence. And so with that, I think that's my ambition, or like what I think of towards the end. So right now, you know, like when I am in complete novice mode, looking for my, you know, next career or next research project, yeah, no, I don't really have confidence because I don't have the repetition, but I do have the hope, and that if I get more repetitions, that confidence will be there. Does that help? Yeah.
I 100% agree. For me, confidence goes with experience. Same thing with progression. I mean, when you've been, like, by your 5th World Championships or whatever, you're like, okay, I know what this is. I've experienced this before. You're more confident in your first one. And same thing, like in the business world now, I have very little confidence in what I'm doing because I'm surrounded by people who've started 4 or 5 different companies already. And so when they ask my opinion, I think, I don't know if I know what I think. Does that make sense? Because I've never done this before. So I think, I end up saying a lot of, I don't know what I think.
Which, by the way, is fine. Like, just like, I feel like it's the people who pretend they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's even worse. I prefer someone to say, I don't know, and we'll figure it out. I think the thing I'd say is, well, I'll talk for myself, I don't know about anyone here, but I don't know if I always was confident as an athlete. Like, I think I was driven by the fear of failure more than anything else. So, like, I think there was always maybe it was the lack of confidence that made me always have a drive, and I might even still have that in my career today. And it's like focusing on what you know you're good at and then trying to bridge the gap on things that you're not so good at. And I think when you're in the workplace, it's just developing really strong relationships and making sure you have a really good team so that you all have confidence together. Like, I think it's just a transition, again, taking skills that you got in your sport, because even though we both did individual sports, I think we all did, maybe you were more of a team sport, but like you're with your fellow athletes and you do rely on each other, and it ends up being the same in the workplace. So I hate to say fake it till you make it, but there's some degree of that, like you have to put yourself forward and be fine. And I admit all the time, you know what, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to go figure it out for you. That's such a better answer than like, and it's just incorrect. So that's, yeah.
I think there's some analogy to like the fast iterative process of doing things. So my confidence was built from doing an event, like one event called the Javelin. You move, the thing goes, you have an action, and then you get a result. Okay, so then you're like matching that movement with that result. So it's like this very fast feedback loop. So my next practice throw, movement, action, result. It's like, cool. When it starts going farther, it's like I have, the confidence is building. It's kind of the same thing here, where I draw confidence from like closing the loop as fast as possible. I do something, I like, hey, that was really good. It's like, cool. Then it's like that. And it could be, you get an iteration of your thing, you send it out, you get customer feedback, and then you're, like that first jump is probably like, then the customers are like, hey, this is kind of cool, or not. You're like, okay, so we change it up. They like it better, and then you kind of keep doing that. That's where I draw it from. It's kind of, it's closing that loop as fast as possible.
I might be in the minority in the room that doesn't know, but what can you guys just talk briefly about what you do now?
Work at a company called Ruist. It's in Palo Alto. It's 12 people, 10 engineers. Myself and the CEO are the only non-engineers. And so just starting our first customers, and right now it's like operations is the role, but it's like everything the engineers don't do. Ruist makes a platform for companies to build web apps, drag and drop, and to deliver kind of like customer service experiences that are like faster, essentially.
I just finished a research project over at Stanford on anxiety and visual threat. And so I'm in the transition from that and looking to create a company actually on the athlete transition and potentially merging that with the veteran transition, and kind of what I was talking about before, that space in between the goals.
I am working for a small executive health and wellness startup in Menlo Park. So there's like 4 of us working on the ground day to day. I got the connection through my network, my sports network, and it's actually a really cool idea. It's taking like the science and testing that elite athletes get at Olympic training centers and bringing it to, well, we're starting with executives in the Silicon Valley area. So how do we manage everything from like what their goals are and then their nutrition, performance, recovery, like everything around that. Just like an elite athlete would get a team supporting them at a training center to help them win medals.
I work at Johnson & Johnson. I'm in a strategy and operations role on the health technology team. After college, did management consulting and then worked at Google. And this team is really focused on how can we bring more technology to J&J in the health space.
I work for Visa in their global sponsorship management group, so I oversee a lot of the US sponsorships, including the NFL, some of the other sports, and then our entertainment properties too. So I've worked in the sponsorship industry for nearly 10 years. Previously on the agency side, Visa was my first brand side job, so really just helping brands activate their sponsorship across a whole different genre of sports, both national and global.
Cool. Thank you everybody for joining us.